Brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.
Damián Ortega has famously said that sculpture is action, not object. That, I think, underpins everything that he does.
When you meet him, that quiet thoughtfulness, but that underlying twinkle in the eye sense of humour belies the fact that, he has this major profile.
Damián is an adventurer, and his interest and curiosity in the world and in the world's materials is ever accelerating.
The notion between solid and void, spirit and matter, image and object, nothingness and content, it was all there.
I always think on Damián like the person in a lab, like a scientific, spending hours and hours from the morning to the night, just watching deeply the eye of a little fly, maybe to find nothing.
Mexican artist Damián Ortega is known for the intriguing sculptures, drawings and films that he makes using everyday materials.
This life is a universe. This daily life, mundane life, is a cosmos full of relations, and everything is transforming, moving, spinning around us.
One of his best-known works, domestic Cosmogon, was made when he was commissioned to make a sculpture for the opening of the brand-new Jumex Museum in Mexico City. Rather than the massive and imposing, Damián chose to glorify the universal and familiar.
I did a piece with a different approach to the monumentality or the scale of the monuments, like always heroic or huge or powerful demonstrations of the artist and institution. And I tried to go for the other side, like let's do something in the ground. Then it was a cosmic planetarium made with daily life objects.
The way I understand that work is like the way Damián makes almost everything, like producing models for understanding reality. And this was based in the solar system. So things move around things. And that's the way we all do in society. So this is a model of society, but not in a didactic way. It's not a pamphlet, it's not propaganda, and this is beautiful.
It was very interesting how he made a monument for a major museum that centers on the domestic and the witty, but also for me it is an extension of the kind of magic realism that Mexico is maybe famous for.
Mexico City is unique. 2,000 meters above sea level, it's a mega city of over 20 million people where rich and poor collide.
This city, Mexico City, I think it's very effervescent and very exciting with lots of energy, mostly because of the long-term history of corruption, violence, degradation, and authoritarianism from the government.
In 1967, it was here, just south of the city, that Damián Ortega was born.
I grew in a very specific and particular context because my father was an actor and my mother was a professor in the primary school.
Damián grew up in a very politicized environment, and his father, he's a kind of a very important communist protagonist in those years.
He's completely from the south. In Mexico, you would say that the left intelligentsia lived in the south, which is Coyoacán and even further Tlalpan. The little he went to school was around that area.
He quickly tired of normal school life.
I decided to quit the school because I don't want to be part of the regular structure for education. My father was very strict, and he said, you need to start to work and to survive by your own.
Aged 16, Damián took a job as a cartoonist for a local paper. He was hoping to further his artistic education, but struggled with the Mexican university's traditional approach.
I think you have to imagine a Mexico that was quite conservative in the 80s. And when Damián Ortega decided he wanted to explore the art schools, he found a very conservative, backward-looking, almost archaic way of teaching.
In that time was very intense, the nationalism, the Mexicanismo. I didn't know why exactly, but I know I want something different.
In 1985, an earthquake devastated Mexico City. It shone a new light on government corruption and sparked a grassroots movement. Young people now wanted to challenge the status quo. The new generation of artists felt their voices were not being heard by the Mexican art establishment.
We all had to survive and go beyond to produce and create. Writers, poets, composers, dancers, and so on. We had to recreate and reinvent new possibilities for using art in a challenging way to do something with dignity in this environment.
Damián and fellow artists began to meet every Friday at artist and lecturer Gabriel Orozco's studio to discuss and make art. The Friday workshops became legendary. The group was now the vanguard of a new generation that wanted to change art and change the world.
Friday's workshop was something like an alternative way of learning that Gabriel proposed.
And this becomes kind of self-made university. We start to come every Friday, 10 in the morning to sometimes 8 o'clock in the night, painting, discussing, reading, or just having beers and chatting.
It was a way of finding solutions with a great sense of humor, a sense of adventure, of really breaking new ground that tried to turn a new leaf on the very traditional and often quite nationalistic way of making art in Mexico.
We never plan exactly what will happen, but we know in some way like it was important.
I think this group of artists in Mexico centered around Gabriel Orozco. They realized there was a different way of doing things.
The idea of art must be this academic work, these serious materials, marble or stone or oil paintings on canvas, and then we jump for something more like a ordinary daily life, simple objects around us.
He did some kind of sculptural suits that were pieces of art. He disguised the way Darth Vader from the film was, but like a low-budget Darth Vader. Then it was kind of a caricature of himself, but a caricature of industry, culture, and production, and so on, capitalism.
That energy, I think, that group of artists has brought to the international art world, a sense of art as something that helps you think about the world through making things, think about yourself in the world through the things that you make and the things that you present.
Mexican artist Damián Ortega has shown his artworks in some of the most prestigious museums and galleries in the world. It all started very differently. In 1999, his friends Jose Curi and Monica Manzuto had just opened Curi Manzuto, a new gallery with big original ideas. The first show, Market Economy, took place in a local market.
And we just took 2 stalls right next to the flower and the piñatas. And Damián just went around to buy fruit, pick up some trash.
And I start to buy and collect very cheap robots like transformers. And also I start to collect all the fruits, vegetables, and something very temporal. And I start to mix and do some strange robots, mix of organic, mix of technology. And it was important to create a new material with recycling or something with life. It was a beautiful idea.
The show was open to all. Artworks were on sale for fruit and vegetable prices.
Someone came and bought them. I mean, really for the same price that you could buy a kilo of fruit.
Okay, how much is one for them? And it was a very cheap price. And he said, okay, I will take all of them. And they say, I'm sorry, no, you can't.
The person that got them, he had to keep them in the fridge.
What's interesting about Damián is that he is always starting with the local. And it might be playful, it might be humorous, but it always has a much deeper and serious undercurrent that connects to the universal, that connects to the political, that is often critical, but without ever hitting you on the head.
Today, Damián lives and works not far from where he grew up, south of Mexico City.
Tlalpan is a very old town that at the end of 20th century it became part of Mexico City, but it's still kind of a little village with all the traditional shops and so on, and a market, a beautiful market, and Damián loves working there.
He walks to the hardware store, works to the market, the Mercado de Tlalpan, to buy food, but also things for his sculptures. And he works a lot with the people around his area. That tells a lot about who he is. No?
Damián and his team are working on a sculpture that's made from materials he's gathered from his neighborhood.
In this case, we use a stone which is very common in Mexico. It's a volcanic rock named Tezontle. Many of the colonial buildings are made with these materials. It's a part of the color of the fire, the color of the soil, and it's a very cultural element. And the other one is a lot of broken bottles with different colors, and I like the idea to create this kind of geometrical form or also a volcano.
Having his studio in Tlalpan is a little bit of this self-imposed isolation from technology. And I think that isolation, it's a metaphor for everything he is. Not being so wired to the web. I mean, he's really very bad with email, for example, and internet. He has this Stone Age mobile phone. Even, I mean, his English is fluent, but even at some point in his youth, not learning English was a political position.
It's a crazy place, kind of a museum of forgotten objects. And for example, here is my own car, my Beetle car. I use for many pieces.
Can we see?
It's a very dirty. It's like I didn't take out for ages.
The Volkswagen Beetle has special significance in Mexico. Introduced in 1967, at its peak there were 1 million models on the road.
Look at this, is the 2004. I think everyone identified with the car because it was a hippie symbol of freedom, the chance to go to the beach, to go to some independence. For me, it was a symbol of my childness. With my family, had a car, we went to the school every day and becomes part of the family. After many years, the car was really damaged, and I decided to do these works, who was a trilogy. One of the stories which I liked the most is the Return of the Prodigal Son, or Ulysses, who give a big trip after years and go back to the original town. And the idea was driving to Puebla, to the factory, and to let the car die. We dig a hole and we bury the car. You saw only the 4 points of the wheels, and looks like the car was buried on the underground. Then it was also fun, like people in the streets just saw what happened here. And it was a very symbolic thing. In some way it was like a funeral, but also like a redemption or cultivating a new seed for the future. It was really intense. I was really depressed because I feel really like it was sad, my car, it was, becomes very emotional. We let the car there a few days and then we take it out. And it was the chance to do another piece.
The next work in the trilogy showed the Beetle as it had never been seen before. First displayed at the 2003 Venice Biennale, it caught the attention of the international art world.
I remember seeing the Beetle, the cosmic thing at the Venice Biennale, and certain things just stand out. I don't know anything about this artist, I haven't seen anything like this. Amazing.
I think he just went following some kind of curiosity that all children have, dismantling things, putting things apart, and not necessarily to understand, but it's more about this curiosity that it becomes playful.
I think one of the beautiful things of that piece is the importance of the things which you didn't see. When you thought it was just one single car, it's not. It's a many thousands of relations between one piece to another. Everyone is designed, everyone is a different material, everyone has a special function, and you understand how marvelous and amazing is all these mechanisms which you use every day.
It was playful, it was humorous, but it also alluded to a very complex political, social situation in Mexico. How the VW, what role it plays in Mexican economies, how the different parts that make up the car are being traded on the black market. So all of this is part of this work that looks so effortless.
Driving around Mexico City, Damián got the inspiration for the final part of the trilogy based on the story of Jonah and the whale.
I was driving my car for hours in the Mexico City, and I thought I feel like Jonas and the whale, and it's fun like this mini car just driving. And I thought maybe it's interesting to do this kind of fight against the human, against the whale or the power, but in a very ridiculous way. It was a fight where I hold the car and I put grease on the wheels, and it was a kind of sumo. And then it was nice because the grease started to flow around. Moby Dick, like the big beast of the nature, the power of the nature, the rivalry against the man, and the obsession to hold the power.
Salt. Unremarkable, every day. This was the centerpiece of Damián Ortega's surprising exhibition at the super prestigious White Cube Gallery in London. Once again, he made use of the ordinary and familiar to highlight bigger issues and concerns.
I saw a beautiful, really surprising image in the newspaper about the submarines they use for transport cocaine. The image was amazing because it was in the jungle. It was a crazy, like a mythological but political image, really rich. The piece was a submarine made with sacks of salt.
Suspended from the ceiling at an angle, so it was dripping a material onto the floor that turns out to be salt.
In the colonial period, the salt trade was incredibly lucrative, but actually exploitative too. In the contemporary world, the cocaine trafficking, drug trade is incredibly lucrative, but phenomenally exploitative and damaging. And I think he was making certain historical parallels, not moral judgments. But there was something also just compelling about the work. This dramatic structure that seemed to be static, and then realised there was a fine flow of salt. And of course, in the end, the piece existed to destroy itself.
The salt, of course, stands in for cocaine, but he is even cleverer than that, because he's really interested that the word salary in Latin is connected to the word salt, because salt, of course, was a commodity in historic times. So he's also alluding to the fact that there is now this parallelism in a commodity and that connection between salt and cocaine.
In the spring of 2016, he became very unwell. While recovering in hospital, he found he was drawn to the most simple of materials.
Clay can be rigid, or all the states of the nature. Like it could be liquid, or could be solid, or could be a stone, but also water. And every piece is a phenomenon.
Damián flew his explorations in clay across the world for his first ever show in Scotland at the Fruit Market Gallery in Edinburgh.
He has displayed on a table 143 objects, all made of unfired clay, from the earliest kind of axes that a hunter-gatherer would use to a tablet of the 21st century.
The feeling which I have the first time when I come inside of this center, it's like, wow, I use all these elements every day to destroy the nature or to transform the nature.
There is that undercut of climate change, of soil erosion, of the way in which humankind has shaped the world, not necessarily for good. I think his icebergs are really interesting. The whole notion of the Arctic as the canary in the coal mine, I think he's dealing very much with that, the way in which humans' influence on the world is not necessarily all to the good.
You could see it again as a humorous comment on the evolution of mankind, but it is also maybe a very potent question about progress and what progress really means.
I think artists are very, very well placed to comment on the world, to help us understand ourselves in the world, to do just enough to get us thinking. And I think Damián is one of a number of contemporary artists working at the moment who absolutely understand that responsibility.
As an artist, we can transform the perspective of the other people, and this creates a new relation with the world.
He's a transformative artist. There's a fluid material poetry, and there's an underlying wry humour, sense of the absurd, and there's often a social or political undertone that you can find if you look hard enough.
He takes his inspirations always from chance encounters, so you literally never know what could be next. He will always surprise us.
Brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.